Started with the recording here. And like I said, I'm really excited about today's talk, why you aren't being quoted. And we really created this twofold because a lot of the folks who come to this, most of them are in the collective, and we've got some retainer folks who jump in too. But when it comes to being quoted, there's a few different ways to look at it. Of course, it's HARO. We've talked about help a reporter out. I know a lot of you do use that outside of kind of that wedding world, but it's also stuff you're sending into us. In addition, some of the pitching that you're doing on your own. So I try to keep in mind all three audience with this. Now, with that being said, in the collective, we do have HARO pitch related sort of webinars and sample sort of information. So anything like that you can find there. So I'm not going to speak specifically to HARO, but I'm going to speak with HARO in mind in the scenario of the collective, which I'm going to use a bunch of examples, and then more in a general sense too, because, hopefully, especially, with you doing some of your own PR, potentially, if you're being placed on Google in particular, you find that you're on the homepage of Google or the first page, and you're going to be contacted by members of the media. And sometimes you're like, well, why did they use this but not use that? So anyways, let's go right in. So why this topic? Why did we jump in this? It could not have been more timely. I mean, this was not how we meant to do it. It was actually one that we came up with probably about 4 or 5 months ago that we wanted to tackle this month. But here's the thing. Now more than ever, there's so little time for everything that we want to do in a day. And we have to make sure the things that we do truly maximize our time. It is not lost on me that when we're asking you to regurgitate all of your thoughts on honoring a new wedding date and cancellations and how to bolster team spirits, all of that is going to take you time. You just can't whip it out. I mean, maybe you can, and that's a wonderful talent to have, but that's not an easy thing to do. And so if you're going to take the time to write it, if you're going to take time to edit it and potentially agonize over it, you want to be able to increase your odds of pickup. Now, on top of that, that's for the collective. But on top of that, in HARO, I would say, but if you've got folks, reporters, reaching out to you on your own for all sorts of different reasons and to quote you and things like that, you want to be the person who gives them the very best quotes, so you're the first person they keep coming back to. And that's going to be essential. I mean, that really is the secret. I'll tell you right now, to the success of the collective in our publicity stuff in general, the writers do like what we send out to them. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples today to really give you guys some visuals on why that's essential. So really it's about maximizing your time, increasing your odds of pickup. And I think now more than ever is making sure you're establishing those relationships with these writers so they are very impressed with you. I will tell you, and I never tell anyone this, but there are times where you've got collective members who've done such an outstanding job that they've come back and the writers say, hey, yeah, you can drop in the collective, but I really want X, Y, and Z to answer this as well, like in addition. And I always think that that's so gratifying to hear when someone in particular really dazzles the writers, because that makes me so happy, to hear that they're getting, that they're being requested and what have you there. So anyways, let's jump in. So let's do a brief review or an overview, if you will, of members of the media in general. Now, I am technically not a member of the media. Of course, I'm in publicity. Yes, I do write for a number of columns, but I don't work day to day as a freelance writer, as of course our friends in the media do, and the staff writers as well. But anecdotally speaking, and based on observations, based on coffee chats, based on all sorts of different education I've been a part of, this is what we hear about the media in general. And I think it's important we go through this briefly before we dive into quotes, because we need to get into the mindset of the media. First and foremost, these guys are always on deadline, always on deadline. I almost just left it at that and said, that's all you need to know. These guys are constantly on a deadline, and it could be 3 days from now, it could be tomorrow, it could be 2 hours from now, but they're always up against a deadline. And typically when they're giving us a deadline, there's really no wiggle room to be late on that. You've got to jump right into the next thing. And I would say now more than ever, based on the nature, of course, of what we're dealing with the COVID crisis, you can imagine that things are moving at such a fast pace that they want to be the first out the door to be talking about virtual weddings, intimate weddings, cancellations, postponements, all those things. They're also balancing multiple projects. And by projects, I really mean writing projects. So believe it or not, a lot of these writers, I don't even know how they do it. They're writing in volume, and they're doing a great job at these great outlets. But, we've got one writer who maybe she writes for the New York Times and she does a handful, like they're very big, deep dives. But then you've got people who are churning out 40 articles a month, sometimes 80 articles a month. I've got one person I work with who's closer to that 70 to 80 mark, which is absolutely remarkable to me when it comes to that. And so you have to remember that when you get these questions from them, and you're going to hear me say this 100 times, basically, when you get these questions, you have to be able to answer them not only timely, but correctly in the way they ask for it. Because they're balancing all of these different articles, they do not have time to come back and say, hey, this is great, but I needed 4 things, not 3. Oh, I asked for 5 sentences, but you gave me 1 sentence each. Can't do that. They're also lacking reliable resources. I share that with you because now more than ever, they are looking for people that they can come to time and time again. I have collective members who outside of the collective who have created their own media relationships over the years, which I 100% support. And they do very well with them because they respond in a timely manner. They write polished things. Like that's going to serve in their favor. Also, let's do an overview of what it means with the current the climate. So with COVID, yes, we're talking about things in crisis at a moment's notice, but it also means that articles could be bumped, and we have to be gracious about that because what could be relevant now may not be relevant tomorrow, or maybe it's not going to be relevant for 3 or 4 more weeks and they have to make adjustments. So remember that. But on top of that, and when I talk about climate, I mean the economy right now. Let's dig right in, because the fact is if you've heard me talk about this before, of course, is that the way it is now is we're seeing a lot of it's so unfortunate. We're seeing so many layoffs at the staff level at some of the biggest names that you know of in the industry. Like we're seeing all sorts of different places who are laying people off. And so what's happening are these guys are becoming what's called freelance writers. So maybe they wrote for the LA Times for a long time, and now they've left the LA Times, but they write for 3 other outlets on their own. Now, the thought is, well, from a PR standpoint, that's kind of great. I mean, obviously the expense is person, but that's kind of awesome, only in the sense of, if they're happy about it, of course, but they're running for a bunch of places, you can increase your chances of being featured. But the other side of it here is they don't get paid unless they're writing articles. Period. Staff writers, you're on salary. These guys are basically per article or their word count as well. So they need us as much as we need them right now. And I think it's important to recognize that we are absolutely going to see an uptick in more and more people doing freelance writing because of these unfortunate layoffs. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that we're trying to give them what they need. They're up against deadlines. It's very, very stressful for these guys right now. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know all of us come from different walks of the industry. We have LLCs, we have S-corps, we have partnerships, but these guys are mainly 1099 contractors. And so they were the last to be able to apply for SBA, the last to apply for unemployment and all those things. And I know I'm preaching the choir right now for a lot of you guys. We're all, what did they say? We're all in the same boat, but it's a different storm. Well, these guys in particular are getting truly nailed. And so I try to have a little bit of understanding when it comes to that too. So I think it's really important that we all talk about that and just understand the mindset of the media before I really dig into my approaches here. You also have to do a little bit of digging and ask yourself a few things. First and foremost, what do I hope to achieve? And I know if you've heard me do these webinars before, you're like, Megan, we always talk about this. And I'm like, there is a reason for it. You have to really ask yourself, okay, why am I doing all these quotes? Why am I jumping in the collective so much? Or why am I pitching these writers and then helping them with things? Is it SEO? Is it being a thought leader? I think it's just important to continue to be vigilant about why you're doing it. I don't mind telling you that I've been pushing myself. I mean, you may have seen I'm in a lot more articles than usual and columns and things like that, because truly wanted to be able to stand out and say, hey, listen, I am, I want to be an authority in the industry for this. I want to be the standout publicist for it. I don't mind sharing you guys in my chest tree that I'm doing that. And I think that's important because it guides why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. I also want you to think to strengths and weaknesses. If we get through the end of this webinar and you're like, quotes are not my favorite thing, you have to ask yourself, Okay, is it because you don't enjoy writing, or it's maybe not something that is your strength? Because it's fine. I can tell you I have millions of weaknesses, and I just don't play to those weaknesses. Instead, I try to figure out what my strengths are. But you want to think about, if you enjoy writing, that's great. If you're great at writing, that's great. But maybe if you're not, I don't want you to be deterred. I want you to recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and maybe think to yourself, well, maybe I just need to talk out these quotes and transcribe them, and then just tweak them. And so I just want you to be mindful of what the strengths and weaknesses are, because a lot of this happens at a moment's notice, and I just want you to be especially mindful. Next, how am I tracking progress? This is something that is essential. Now, typically when we're talking about progress, I'm talking about contact forms, how did you hear about us, Google Analytics, blah, 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 blah. But today what I'm saying is this: if you are someone who is, whether you're doing it yourself through the collective, it's a mix of things, and you're finding that some of your quotes are not being picked up, Haro, what have you, I would suggest that you have just an easy peasy spreadsheet, some sort of Google spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, I don't care what it looks like, and just put what it was, maybe a Dropbox link or a link to your quotes, and whether it was used or not. So you can go back with a discerning eye. And that's what I have to say, is you have to have a discerning eye about it. Also, of course, if you're in the collective, you're more than welcome to get on office hours with me, and so we can talk about it, because they're never going to use all of your quotes. But if you find you're consistently not being picked up, maybe we can talk about that as well. But I think it's important, because part of it is we become too anecdotal, and we're like, none of my quotes are being used. We find out half of them are. When you do the numbers, you're like, oh, that's not that bad. Actually, that's actually quite good. And so make sure you are tracking your progress, whether it's a mix of what you're doing with me and Haro and so on and so forth. That's something we do as well. We track all of our progress. I mean, believe me, it's a painful thing to see sometimes, but I would rather have the uncomfortable statistics than when it comes to that. So next, when the queries come in, let's dive into what we need to start, because you may think, okay, this is about writing quotes. Well, no, this is getting first into the mindset and the steps that you need to take. So when a query comes in, could be Haro, could be someone directly writing you, right? Could be in the collective through the PR leads. Hopefully you're all getting them every morning, or every morning they come live. You have to ask yourself a number of things. One, what is being asked? Truly, make sure you truly understand what is being asked of me and what is being expected of me. Those are two different things. So the first thing is, what is being asked of me? And that could be, do I understand the overview of what this article is about? And you're going to see, actually use one that we just did a couple of weeks ago on Wedding Wire, and it was how to give back during your wedding. And some people answered that in a totally different way than it was originally interpreted. It was supposed to be like how to give back to the community at large, but it's like donating your flowers and yada, yada, yada. But some people answered it like, well, this is how you give back to your wedding pros who've been so great to you. And it was interesting. And we actually made that work. But I thought to myself, how interesting that we were interpreted it differently. So that's what is being asked. Do I truly understand what the article is about, and do I need to seek clarification? And of course, we're always mindful of trying to be clear with you guys about that. And some of them come off more negative, and some are more positive as well. So but always seek clarification. I'd rather you seek clarification, whether it's myself, whether it is a writer. A writer does not mind. If you write them once, the word is once, to seek clarification. Don't ask a million questions, but say, hey, I read through this, I understand the parameters, but I've got a couple quick questions to make sure I'm doing it right. They may not respond to you, but at least you've asked, and then you can just go through with the quotes. Also, what's being expected of me? So that's different. That's not about the topic. That's about what the rules are. I've got one writer, I'm sure you've seen it 100 times, where she's like, I need 3 to 5 sentences per point. And that girl is always going to ask that. She's one of the ones I'm going to see on the webinar tonight. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense when it comes to that. And so you just know she's going to ask that. So make sure you understand. So is she asking for, or she or he, I'm sorry, how extensive does this need to be? Do they need photos? How are you going to be, like, are they asking for your crediting? Do you have to sign off on anything? So what is being asked is really the theme of the article, and then what's being expected of me, so that if you ask yourself that early and answer it quickly, you are not surprised at the end. If there's something like, oh, I didn't realize I had to be only 100 words each or whatever, then you have to ask yourself, can I answer all of these? Because there are going to be times where you can answer all of them, and there are times where maybe a couple of them are not the right fit. And the last thing you want to do, I can't stress this enough, don't research the answer and then just answer it that way, because we can always tell. We can always tell, and then we have to go back and ask you and say, oh, well, is this really your wheelhouse or is it not? I always appreciate, we had that engagement chicken one recently, which I hope you guys get a good laugh at. And Shannon Tarrant sent me a GIF that was like this hilarious GIF about being totally confused. And I'm like, that's the right answer. If you don't know what the engagement chicken is, I mean, I have an engagement chicken mug, so I clearly knew what it was, but not everyone will. So can I answer all of these? Is that going to be a problem if I can't? Be especially mindful of the fact that with these quotes too, is it's better that you're honest with them and say, listen, this one in particular is better geared towards a lawyer. And that's actually been my thing with COVID. We talked about this anyway, took my COVID crisis PR stuff, is if someone sends you something and you are not in a position to answer it, you should not answer it. But instead, you should find someone who can answer it for them. That's why Caroline Fox is literally on my speed dial right now. She's my lawyer. She's amazing. She's with the Engage Collective, focused on the wedding industry. So when Wallet Joy sent us that really, oh God, it was like going to be 3,000 words on COVID crisis. And she's like, can you handle it? Like, sure. But I saw the legal stuff and I said, no way, Jose, not going to do it. So I have to be mindful of that. So how can you go ahead and help from there? So just, I want you to be mindful of that. Then what's your bandwidth? How much time do I have? You're going to see Ruta Fox, actually, who's this amazing publicist and writer, gives a little bit of tip about being fast at these, but what's the bandwidth? Do I have the time for this? And again, being honest with people, if it's truly not something you could do, or if you have to build in time that's unexpected. Because that's the thing, it really isn't just scanning the questions, it's digging into the questions. Even if you don't answer right them, have an understanding of what's being asked, what's being expected, and do I have the bandwidth for all this, or how can I make the bandwidth for this? Because you really don't want to turn people down unless it's a question you can't answer. So let me give you a great, this one. This is from the collective, right? And this ended up being for Wedding Wire. So I thought it was for brides.com. So let me explain this too, just a little insider, let me give you into my world. So this writer and I do a ton together, and I personally know her and know how busy she is right now, like bananas busy. So we were talking about doing a ton of stuff with brides, but she does a ton for Wedding Wire too. And I did not ask her for which media outlet it was, because that is a superfluous question that I don't want to fill her inbox with. Like, that shows you kind of my protective nature of my writers. And I'm like, my guys will get over it because we know it's going to a national site. The biggest thing is just the linking and stuff. So just a little tip on how we manage our writers too. So one of our national writers is working for this. She was looking for name, role, company, and the URL. So that's why we were leaning towards brides.com, because Wedding Wire links the storefronts. And can you briefly explain the importance of giving back right now and how the wedding industry can be a great vehicle for his? So if you had been someone who read that and thought, oh wait, is this B2B or B2C? Like, this would have been a good time to seek clarification. What are 4 to 5 ways couples in general can give back after COVID-19 with their wedding? Please explain in 3 to 5 sentences minimum. So y'all, this is where we run into problems all the time, is we'll have people respond and they'll only give us 3 answers and only be 2 sentences each. Like, I would say the initial run of the responses for this, 80% of the people didn't do it correct. And that's not going to work for her. Like, it has to be correct. So, and there are times where we have enough time to go back and send it back to the clients, but there are times where it's like, nope, this didn't work and this has to go out now. So that's why that's very important. When it comes to anything else you need to add, that is a very common question. And typically what you do is you use that for expanding what's already being talked about, or if there's something that you truly feel is very important and needs to be covered. So next, you get to know the writer. If this is something you're doing on your own, not through the collective, this is who I'm speaking to right now. Or if you're doing this through Haro. So let's say you've gotten the query, you understand what's being asked, what's expected of you, but then it's like, oh, well, what's kind of the writing style and what have you. Enter Muckrak, which I don't think I'm pronouncing correctly, but it is fine. Muckrak is, and Contently is another one too, or Contently, I don't know. It's not a pronunciation webinar, so we'll see. But you got it right up there. This is wonderful. So if you are being pitched someone who you don't know as well, or you'd like to revisit their work, typically you can find their byline pretty quickly. Here's the thing. If they write for Martha Stewart Living, for example, right? Let's say they write for Martha Stewart Living and you click on their byline. Unfortunately, they may not have an author page where you can read all their recent stuff. So it's better to go to a site that's free, like contently, or muckrack, so that together you can get a better understanding of what's their style of writing, what tends to work well for them, how do they quote people, what sort of quotes are they using, like all of that is super, super important. And so I usually say, listen, if you're doing that, it does not hurt to go ahead and just get to know them a little bit better, so that together you can say, okay, that's great. So Lauren tends to write like this, or these are kind of quotes she uses. They tend to be shorter, they tend to be longer, or what have you. So take some time to do that if you've got a few minutes. I think it's helpful. It's something that we do behind the scenes as well. So let's talk about actually writing the quote. So we've talked about kind of going big picture, getting into the mindset, understanding what they're looking for. So let's really dig into the actual writing of the quotes. And I'm going to use a ton of examples. I'm actually super excited. I'm nerdy excited about this. Okay, because I'm using all y'all. So I'm like super, super jazzed about this. So let's jump in. First and foremost, if there is one thing, it's like, I just want you guys to walk away with this saying, okay, I got it. Be specific. I want you to be specific as possible, because you're going to get broader based questions. And then you're going to get more like, can you give us some tips? And there are going to be things that you have to be quoted on that you're like, this is so obvious. Like, I can't believe I have to write about this. But the fact of the matter is, the people who answer it, and yes, you have to answer the broad answer, but then you dig into specifics, they are far more likely to picked up. Joanne Grigoli is like killing it right now with her press. I'm so proud of her. I should have her come on, just like interview and like, tell us all your secrets, girl. She's been doing the collective. She's a tier 2 member, but she's also been pitching on her own in New York, and she's been on like every TV thing and all that. So this is someone who she's really kind of got a good, strong handle on what's going on here. And so here is a question that brides asked that was very generalized. And it said, okay, how is COVID affecting the wedding industry? And so you can see what Joanne, it starts very like broader based. The truth is coronavirus has disrupted the wedding industry. We all know that, right? But she had to say that. And that's something that you guys have to say. There's so much in the air right now. So at this time, due to uncertainty, planners was focused. So now she really dug in what she told them, and then they derived and didn't pull a direct quote. But if you go back to see what she did, is they're talking about the dates that are being, it's not just, oh, COVID is affecting us because we're having to postpone a lot of things. Instead is, well, this is how COVID is really affecting us. Right now, the weddings through June and potentially July are the ones being affected. It's going to be domestic. It's going to be, they're considering postponing literally all weddings abroad in 2020. So Joanne, which you can see, they only direct quoted part of it, but then they went in and pulled the rest of it. She didn't just say broad base, oh, well, we're seeing a lot of postponement. She's saying, these specific months are being postponed right now, like at this current time. Domestically, this is what's happening. Abroad, this is what's happening to them. So can you see it's taking that extra step to really dig in and answer it just a little bit further. So being specific. Here's another one. So this is for Catalyst, and you guys did a great job when it came to this. So they were talking about alternative ways to attend a wedding, right? So we're talking about a virtual wedding or extending so people can come and join you. So we had a lot of people chime in on this, but what was great about Laura Maddox, as well as Shannon Tarrant, is they didn't just say, well, very broad-based, right? Well, you could also stream people coming to the wedding. That's another way to make them feel included, which a lot of people did, guys. Instead, they gave, you could use FaceTime, you could see Skype, this could work. I've seen it work. I think Shannon took it another step further than that, because she got even further along saying StreamYard. It's great for live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. It's easy to share a link with anyone, easy for grandparents to use. I mean, that Shannon truly, like Laura did a great job. Shannon truly nailed that one. Because it's not just about, well, we're going to be streaming, this is how you're honoring people. Instead, you're like, yeah, we're streaming, and these are the ways people are doing it. These are the programs and softwares. And that's that little extra bit of specific is what the writers like. Here's another one. So this did not go through the collective. This was actually with our retainer clients. We did a couple of things with People Magazine recently, which, yes, we screamed. We were so excited about this. In case you're wondering, it was a lifelong goal. So it was like achievement unlocked, when it came with that. And so what was great about this, and you can see with using specifics, it's done just the way it was with Joanne too, is yeah, there's some quotes at the end from Leah Weinberg, who's also in the collective and a retainer client, and then you've got Caroline Fox, who's my go-to lawyer. But they went into the specifics, and oftentimes, even if they weren't directly quoted, they were pulled in, and then you can see it was worked in saying that this is what they said. So Weinberg said the coronavirus outbreak has triggered contract provisions for many spring events. By the way, guys, I should mention Leah used to be a lawyer. So, but that most are being handled on a case-by-case basis in which some vendors are keeping their deposits and not requiring any final payments, and others are providing full refunds. And so she digs into the details. When I sent this over to both of them, to their credit, I think it was about 5 or 6 questions. They wrote a page and a half, because the fact is they wanted to get into the down and dirty so that whether they're getting a direct quote or something like Fox says, blah, 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 blah. So I thought they did a great job with this as well. Stephanie Kane. Now, she is an amazing lifestyle writer. If you've been to Engage, and I'm sure you really have met there, she writes for Fortune, she writes for New York Times, writes for a bunch of awesome places, and she has been one of our media chit chats. So first and foremost, if you haven't listened to it, it is such a good interview. And so I asked her, I was like, girl, can you give me some quotes here? Like, you tell me. And she said, answering the question with details. I asked a kosher caterer to describe what his business does for a roundup about best caterers. When asked about catering for kosher clients, he only said to me, it was custom, quote unquote, and he needs to know what a client wants before he can share food or any details. So they said that, right? And then by comparison, a different kosher caterer gave me all the information on their certification, how long they've been kosher catering, details on the rabbinical supervision, and sample menus. Guess who I picked for inclusion? You could not have said it any better with that. So getting into the dirty details, basically, when it comes to do that. And I'm very grateful for Stephanie for doing that for me as well. You also want to skip the extras. So this one is a little bit harder to explain. So I grabbed some screenshots. So these were actually great quotes, but let me point out a couple of things that stand out here. So this one was also, we're just for the sake of consistency talking about the wedding wire, how to get back today. So when someone writes in, and see how the first sentence is number 1, and one way to get back during COVID-19 with your wedding is by planning now, instead of waiting to see what happens, da, 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 da. So the problem is when you say something like, and the one way to get back during COVID is, you are reiterating the question, how do you get back with COVID? Well, the one way to get back with COVID is, that's problematic, because if you think about it, the whole article is about that. It is repetitive if you say that. So what you would want to do is change in one way to get back during COVID with your wedding to start planning your wedding now. Number 2, another way to get back during COVID is by making thoughtful purchasing choices. Instead, take out another way to get back during COVID is, and just put make thoughtful purchasing choices, or consider making thoughtful purchasing choices. Like, skip the part where you are reiterating the question back. It is not going to be helpful for them. And the problem is they more than likely have to use direct quotes from you. So they have to scrap it all together. I actually double checked on those parts of the questions were unfortunately not used. This person was quoted amply in the article, but those sentences could not be used. And so you have to be very mindful of that. So you've also got to think beyond the typical. And guys, this is not easy. And I think, and Shannon Tarrant, which I'll mention a little bit, she did a great job being, she talked about how she gets quoted a billion times a year. And she talks about this too, is if you want to sit down and answer right away, which you absolutely can, but know that you just have to hit our deadline, right? She answers it. And then you kind of got to walk away from it and come back and make sure you've really answered it the way that no one else would. That's the thing, because I think the problem is when we jump in and say, well, this is how it's being impacted, or, oh, you could do this. If it's your first answer, my guess is it's the first answer of a lot of people. And I try my best to let you guys know with the collective too, and say, hey, somebody else already said this, especially if you're coming near the end of it. But keeping in mind with a lot of things, like even the collective and some of the things you guys are working on, you are absolutely competing with other people for those spots. It's not just collective members if you're doing Haro or anything like that. So this one was one that came out in She Finds recently, and Kevin jumped in on this one. I thought it was great. The question was, or the whole thing, you guys might remember it, was what are things that couples are doing to like overdo it for what are things they're doing to appease their guests that they're going to regret doing? And most people had the same kind of answers over and over again. Inviting all friends and family and like all those things. And it's fine. But at the end of the day, she was taking the non-typical stuff. So, or the atypical. So he talked about he jumped into feeling obligated to host an after party. Oftentimes the wedding day begins at the crack of dawn, which makes for a very long day. Instead, consider a goodbye brunch the next day, which leaves you the opportunity to decompress and spend time with your new spouse and still have a chance to spend more time with family and friends. So what he was saying was some couples feel on the day of the wedding that they have to host an after party. Like they have to keep going. And he's saying, don't do that. Do a brunch if you want to see people. Don't worry about it. And I thought that was great because he's talking about the time of day that a lot of people don't jump into, and it's the end of the evening. And that's something that is just wildly not covered enough when it comes to wedding media, in my humble opinion. And so you've got to think beyond the typical. You write it, you come back and you say, is this really what I want to say? Now, don't get me wrong. When you're talking about contracts, when you're talking about planning virtually, there is going to be only so many things you can say. But when it comes a little bit more to these generalized ones, you need to think beyond the typical. Grammar is key, y'all. Grammar is key. This is so essential. So you've got to make sure that, especially if writing's not your thing, you've got to have some sort of help with this. Grammarly I pay for it just because we go through, we average 30,000 words. Right now we average 30 to 40,000 words a week when using it, but you won't have that many words. But with Grammarly, you have to, you can do it for free. And what we'll do is help you with your verbiage. And you want to make sure you sound like yourself, but it catches stuff that you wouldn't catch just with, Microsoft Word or whatever with that. Okay, let's dissect delete. Like, let's go back now and really dissect things and make sure that we truly, truly understand when it comes up for this. So this is the Wedding Wire one. One of our national writers was working an article. Topic is how to get back with your wedding after COVID, open to all, see below. And so its name, can you briefly explain the importance of giving back right now and how the wedding industry can be a great vehicle for this? What are 4 to 5 ways brides and grooms can give back after? Please explain in 3 to 5 sentences minimum. So you're taking a look at this, and then anything else you want to add. She is asking for 4 to 5 separate ways that are 3 to 5 sentence minimally each. That is essential right now. And again, we talked about the importance of making sure we understand what they mean by giving back, because it's giving back to your vendors. No, she ended up using some of it, but it was more based on giving back to like the community at large. So see, I pushed this again, the 4 to 5 ways. And I say that just because, like I said, I looked back at the numbers, about 80% of the people didn't get this right the first go around. And so this is one that actually got picked up. Jamie Chang of Mango Muse does a great job in the collective. She's been with us for a couple of years at this point. She's wonderful. And so what she said here is, if there's ever a time to give back, it's now, as the world struggles to get a hold of the new reality that's been brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. The economy, now remember she said this is not how you do it, but she's talking about kind of the state of affairs. She's specific. The economy has taken a sabotaging blow as a result of the hundreds of thousands of businesses that we've had to close indoors in response to the government order shutdown, and many of those businesses. So she's saying here in her quote specifically, and some of that's derived from the writer and some of it's from her stuff. So Jamie says, your wedding itself supports so many small businesses. And then she says, for most weddings, at least 5 to 20 businesses and livelihoods, that just by having your wedding, you're already giving back in a way, says Jamie Chang. Especially now during these tough economic time, planning a wedding instead of canceling is immensely supportive. So many people say postpone, don't cancel, postpone, don't cancel. Very few people got into the nitty gritty though. She's saying here, which augments the other things being said, is she's saying your wedding is supporting 5 to 20 businesses per celebration. And so I thought this was brilliant, and I just wanted to make sure. And I knew you look at it and go, oh, that's easy to think about, but you get to think about that. So this was unused, but I thought it was fantastic, and I wanted to share it. And part of it is just because there's so much great content. But Kristen did this. She did a great job. Giving back is what we can make or break the economy moving forward. Doing so can stimulate the economy more than you realize and can lead to things like getting back to normal sooner rather than later. The event industry is a perfect area to give back because there will be so much to celebrate once we come out on the other side of the pandemic. Jump in with ease and within the recommendation guidelines, of course, to plan these celebrations. It'll be so constructive towards restructuring the industry and lending to its resilience. I thought this was wonderful. Now, it wasn't used this go around, but it can be used in the future, right? And so she gets into the fact of like what the other side, it's like, oh, we're going to, instead of saying, we're just going to be, I'll be so happy to be celebrating again. Instead, it really digs in. And I love that. So also get creative. I thought this was great because we had a lot of people respond, and there's only so many. You can't always donate food. So that's not always used. You could donate flowers, different things that you can be doing, making thoughtful purchases. I thought Destination Wedding Travel Group did a great job. Jen Avey did this and said, update your honeymoon plans. So once it's finally safe to travel, consider adding a day of volunteering to your plans. Nobody else came up with this one. And I thought that was great. There was a good reason that was pulled in. So well done for that. Talking about volunteering at a local charity and what have you, I thought they were great. So top hangups we're hearing from members of the media: grammar and typos. That's problematic all the time. And I think a lot of time we just can't help it. We're people pleasers. We want to rush, get it out the door. Also is not following instructions. That is something that absolutely stresses people. Stresses our writers out. They're like, you have to follow the instructions. I know I've said it 100 times, but that's the number one thing. Sharing too much. I don't mean going too robust with great information. I mean going well beyond the questions being asked and almost getting to the point where you're pushing a different agenda. You've got to be so careful with that. And listen, I don't expect you, I'm not saying you guys, I should say, are being calculating about it. Instead, it's more that people can help themselves. We're in hospitality, we're hospitable, and we're sharing way too much right now. So way too much. So next is selling anything. So got to be careful with that, because you just have to make sure you're not pushing out your own agenda. We have to be careful that we're not, if we're giving examples on things. And I think, let me give you a great example from last night on Maze. We had Elizabeth with Rock Paper Coin, which does invoicing, just really great for the industry. I really like them. And she was talking about email and customizing and all these things and templates. And she said, listen, you can also, there's invoicing companies where they create the emails for you. Now, does hers do that? Does her company do that? It does, but she didn't mention them by name, and that's going to build credibility. There are other ways to get her name out there. And a lot of guys have seen, because I've talked to you about these quotes, is we really can't, we have to be thought leaders. We can't reference back to our stuff. Like, we can't say, well, this guide that I created or this thing that I did, like they'll never go for it. Ever, 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 exclamation point. So just be very mindful. We're here to serve and educate first and foremost. So Brittany Dry with Love Inc. says, they said, don't do this. Don't make it about yourselves. We want your expert insight, not a pitch, on who you're sponsored by and why you're so great. And I know not your market, but going to leave this thought here for others to see. The pushing of a sponsorship brand happens a lot with beauty experts. And of course, this is just in general for FYI. I get that they're paid to do so, but there needs to be a balance. Having your recommendations all be from one brand isn't going to get you a placement. And that's typically if you're sponsoring someone, so you just got to be mindful of that. Now, Ruta Fox. Ruta Fox is a legend. She is a publicist and a writer. She's in Greenville, and she says, try to be first. If you answer a query a few days after, when you get around to it, the early bird already got the worm. And that's very true. Every writer is different. My job is to know the idiosyncrasies of my writers, so you don't have to worry about that. But I happen to know, like, some of my writers, and I've told you sometimes, I'll say this one is the first to get to her. So I might give you a deadline. If today's Tuesday, Wednesday at noon, right? But I'll say, listen, it's Wednesday at noon, but I'm sending my first batch tonight at 8 p.m. because I know my chances are so much more likely to get picked up. So be mindful of that. Now, if you haven't already, you've got to make sure you give this a listen. Listen, in the collective, there is a media interview I did with Shannon Tarrant, who has gotten, in her first year with us, she got picked up 40 times. And she offered, she's like, hey, can I come on and do this? I was like, heck yeah, you can. Let's do it. She was wonderful. So anyways, with regards to that, I think you should give it a listen, because she talks from a collective member as well. I think she did a great job with that. So anyways, so your to-do list, this is what I want you to do. If you haven't already, try and consider setting up a spreadsheet. Maybe don't track what you've done already, but try and track ahead. I will start putting in the weekly emails. Pickups that are related to the collective. We get a bunch of pickups in a week that are real wedding features and a bunch of other things. So I'm not going to share all those because that's not going to be relevant, but the stuff that's come to fruition, you want to be mindful of. So I want you to go ahead and take a look at that and work on that. And then from there, give Shannon's a listen if you haven't listened to it yet. If there are particular writers that you're working with, maybe block out even 15, 20 minutes to go through their muck rack and see what kind of articles they're writing about these days, just to get a better feel for what it is that they're looking to do. And of course, sign up for office hours anytime you want. You're welcome to do so. Happy to do it. So see you next time. We're going to be talking about, and if you guys have questions, throw them in here. Tips to be an easily booked speaker. It's Wednesday, May 6th, right around the corner, 12 Eastern. I'm home all the time now, so it shouldn't be a problem. NACE, if you haven't signed up yet, go to nace.net. I will be back on at 4 o'clock. So in 47 minutes, I gotta go put on lipstick. And we'll be on there. So we're talking about all the things cash flow today with Michelle Loretta. We have so many good people on today. I'm so excited. So if you can do that as well, please go ahead and take care of that. Oh, yep. Hey, Kevin, I didn't know you were on. I saw that he just posted. So if there's anything else you need, let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good afternoon.